Hi, welcome to Backstage, where we delve into the creative process with talented theater artists. My name is Donna Blanchard, I'm your host, and today we'll be talking with Stephanie Conching and Jim Murphy about the art of stage management. So, Jim Murphy and Stephanie Conching, I'm really glad that you're here to talk about stage management. I think most people in the theater, most people outside of the theater, and a lot of people within the theater really don't understand what goes into that job. And both of you do an exemplary job of stage managing shows. So you're the perfect people to talk to about this. Thank you for your time to do it.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I'd like to start off talking about what attracts you to a project. What makes you want to contact a director and say, I would like to work my hind end off for you on this show? Stephanie, would you like to start?
Well, I've never actually had to reach out to someone because people will come to me first. But I suppose what makes me say yes is if the people involved in the show are a positive energy, and if the show itself is good fun or a good message or of a really exciting artistic quality. So I'm sure if I was reaching out to a director, it would be involved with those things too.
Okay, gotcha. Jim?
Well, I'm not as hot a commodity as Stephanie. I actually have to go and reach out if I want to do something. But I think what generally for me it has to do with the show. It has to do with the director sometimes. A lot of it is timing and my availability, and a lot of it is just I have I see it as deep and artistic need in myself to stage manage a show as I have to audition for a show.
That's interesting. And then, so what would you say to look for if you're teaching someone about stage management? And we can go right to you, Jim. What would you tell them to look for, hope for in a project?
I think what makes it rewarding to me is the opportunity to be a part of the artistic process. So that you're not necessarily, because a lot of times stage managers, and it depends on the director. Every director is different with how they want to work with stage managers. And sometimes directors will bring them in at the very end, like around tech. But sometimes directors bring them in the very beginning and have them involved in not necessarily the design phase, but sort of they're helping coordinate. And so I would say for somebody looking to get involved, develop a relationship with the director, somebody who wants to do it, and see what you can get involved in. See what you can learn from that director and learn that process, and just sort of like hang out and help out where you can. Because that, for me, is a much more rewarding opportunity than somebody who just comes in at the end and starts, working on things during tech.
Stephanie, would you say you prefer to get involved in the project earlier rather than later?
If I have time, like Jim was saying, stage managing is a great deal of time. But if I have time, being from the front end is really a great help, because you can know the language of the director and the artists involved in the production. You can really know how the movement of scenery is going to go and costumes from the beginning, instead of having to learn it at the end, at the very last minute. But I think you can still gain some of that artistic excitement if you don't come in till the end, because it's like a Christmas present. Say you're coming in on Christmas morning, and now you've got to open this present, and you've got to make sure that the things that are in the box fit together and make a great show on the stage. So it's kind of up to you to make the different elements fit together, which is artistic in itself.
Yeah. Okay, so here's what I'd like to do next. I'd like to look at this in macro, and then we're going to get into some micro. And let's say that you have an intern, a protege under your wing, and you're going to start off with that person and let them know an overview of I'm your intern, and I'm asking you to. What does a stage manager do? Would one of you like to go first? What does a stage manager do? Jim, what does a stage manager do?
A stage manager is there to assist all facets of the production. So to assist the director, to assist the actors, the designers, really to sort of help navigate the entire process, regardless of when you step in, whether you step in tech or not. And so you're really there to learn everything about the production, because eventually, once a show goes up, you're going to be handed that production. That is your show to make sure happens every Thursday, Friday, Saturday night, and Sunday matinee. And so you need to have learned it and own it as best as you can. And I think learning the entirety of the process and being as engaged as you can is important.
Okay. And Stephanie, can you continue that line, and maybe can you go down a bullet list of things that a stage manager does?
Sure. And I'm gonna look at it from the sense of a musical as well, like for an opera. You need to know when costumes change. You need to know when scenery changes. You need to know when your actors go on and off the stage. You need to be a people person, because if something kind of goes awry at one of the performances, you need to be able to make the decision about how to fix it, or how to replace an actor if you need to, or how to call a pickup rehearsal if you need to do that. So you have to be able to talk with all of the people involved with the show to get the schedule going. So you've got a schedule, which means you've got to be a people person who is organized to make a schedule, because you've got to take anywhere from, you can have a show with one person, or you can have a show with 60 people. You've got to be able to put all of those different schedules together. You may have to work with a union crew, which means you've got breaks to take and hours to work within. You have to work with facilities. There's so many things you have to be able to juggle.
Doesn't
including personalities. Yeah, I mean, you have to you have to work with a lot of different personalities. And, spoiler alert, actors tend to be an emotional bunch. And so I know, no one I've ever worked with, but you have to work with a lot of different personalities and address all of their needs and bring them together every night and put on a show.
Doesn't the director do these things?
Sometimes people are afraid of the director, and they don't want to talk to the director about a scheduling conflict, that they forgot to tell you that they were going to fly to a neighbor island for the weekend or something like that. And then, as Jim noted earlier, as soon as the show is up, as soon as it's opening night, a lot of times the director will go away. they may come back and watch every now and then and give support, but after the opening night, it's kind of in the stage manager's hands to make sure the product stays the same for every audience member.
Yeah, that's one of the things that once I got into college, and in high school, your director's there every night doting on everything that's going on. And I got into college, and after opening weekend, the director disappeared. And
Like, what?
and we all go, huh? Oh, wait a minute. And that's when a really good stage manager is so important for the production, everything that follows after that. So thank you both. Let's talk about, let's get into the nitty gritty of it now. Let's say that you are, in this scenario, you are joining a show, you're coming in pretty close to Tech Week, the week before the show opens. Let's talk about the first steps that you are going to go through, and we can start with your script. Jim?
Sure. So, I mean, really by the time a stage manager or show gets to tech, the actors are off book, and somebody has probably been working with them online. So if it hasn't been the stage manager, perhaps it's been an assistant director. But you've got to be incredibly familiar with the script. Not only the script, but the movement of the show before you ever get to tech, just because you may have some set of dialogue, but there may be movement on stage within that dialogue that you've got to be familiar with. So getting familiar with just the visual aspect of a show before you go into tech, before you start worrying about all of the lights and all of the sound and all of the other things that go into the technical aspect of it, is key, because once you go into tech, everything gets very, very confusing for a lot of people. When actors first put on costumes, when they first start to see things under a light, when there's a sound cue where there has been a void before, everything changes, and you've got to be able to assist with the continuum of all of that work that the actors have done, getting to that point to make sure that it's fluid and that all of that technical aspect adds to the good work that they and the director have been doing.
So you need to get to know that script and what the director has determined to do with it really, really well. Stephanie, if you're unable to join until a little bit later in the game like this, what kind of steps will you take to get to know that?
Well, I guess I would hope that there might have been an assistant director or someone who was part of the process that I can either take their book. Maybe they've got a script that they've been putting entrances and exits and cues in. So I might borrow their book and then either make it my own if that was the intent of the book, or just copy it into my own writing. Make sure I've got my own notes into the script. But I would hope that as stage manager, I would come in at least a week before you're doing technical stuff, so that you can watch Act 1 and Act 2 and then a full run, and sort of put layers into what you're going to do. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, you did. And let's say you're coming in a week before Tech Week.
Yeah, okay.
So you've got all of that information, and now we're actually in Tech Week. What are your responsibilities there?
Scheduling, again, is the big thing. Making sure that the puzzle fits together. And the puzzle would include the set pieces, along with making sure that the actors are safe on the set. If there's music involved, we need to make sure we can hear the music. Pretty soon we're going to have to add costumes into it. So we're going to have to know how long it's going to take to get from a dressing room to the stage. timings are going to start changing. Props may have been on one side of the stage, and now we have to change them to the other side of the stage because of the way that the puzzle is fitting together. So you have to be adaptable at this point, as well as flexible, because when we don't all have the luxury of rehearsing in the space that we're going to be performing in. So what fits really nicely in our rehearsal hall is going to change as soon as we get to our performance space. So we have to adapt and be flexible to that new location, and adding in new people, new the lights, like Jim was saying. Something's going to be brighter, and if there's a step, you need to be aware of the step, because in the rehearsal hall you probably didn't have real steps. You probably had stairs taped on the floor. So it's a lot of changes, and hopefully you have some time to build layers of change in.
Go ahead. Did you?
And ultimately, you're creating a book that that the stage manager has, that is essentially everything that you need to know about running that show. So that it's got, because we've done shows, we've all done shows where the stage manager has sat in an enclosed booth that is separate from the audience and can talk on a headset to the person running the light board, the person running the sound board, somebody backstage, if there's a spot operator, and the audience can't hear all of that, versus very intimate spaces where the stage manager is literally sitting right behind that last row, and they may be running the lights and the sounds all by themselves. They may need to somehow communicate with somebody backstage, but not have a headset to do it. So you've got to create this book that essentially, outlines every single light cue, every single sound cue within the confines of that script, because it's the getting hit by a bus theory, that like, if for whatever reason something happens to the stage manager one night and they can't show up, somebody can come in and pick that book up and go through the script and run the show based on all of those cues. But you've got to, by the time you get that book put together, and that book changes constantly, you have to know the show by the back of your hand.
Yeah.
There's a horror story of Hawaii Opera Theater here in Honolulu. Had a stage manager come in from the mainland, and we have guest artists come in, and so they want to go hiking or go to the beach or partake of our fabulous aloha in the islands. The stage manager went hiking in Manoa, and her car was broken into, and the thing that was stolen was her stage management book for the opera. And we were in tech rehearsals. We were about to open the show, but because she was so familiar with the show, and she had such a great community of workers with her, they were able to just spend a long day going back into a new score and writing everything down. So I was amazed by her ability to be calm in a very stressful situation.
Who stole that book?
Right. And what do they need with it? They should have just looked at it and said blah and put it back.
I know, it's not like we have two competing operas on this island and it was the rival trying to get that book.
That other opera company.
Yeah.
I think let's go back just a little bit, because when you're talking about within that move from rehearsal into Tech Week and being cognizant of I want to make sure the actors are safe and the props are really where they need to be according to the cues and everything. I think a lot of people would assume that that's the director's responsibility, that the director has thought of those things. And many have and do, but I feel like we should talk about your relationship with the director and how that, what that is like from the very beginning, what those discussions and meetings are like from the beginning. Who would like to talk about that?
I think it varies by director. I mean, I've had directors that I've worked very closely with. Tracy, who came and directed a show at Kumu several years ago, that I went to college with. She and I moved to Chicago to be her stage manager. I've probably stage managed a dozen shows that she directed. So you definitely have a rapport sometimes with stage managers. Directors. Directors are trying to apply a vision that they've got for a show, for a production, and sometimes the practical interpretation of that division or that vision gets complicated, and so the stage manager can sort of step in and be of assistance to, you know, not change things, but make, you know, like costume changes or exits and entrances and things that, because the director is so focused on the vision that they are trying to put forward, they may need some help go with some of those more practical fixes. This also, I should caveat all of this by saying I am not a director at all. I've tried it a few times. I'm horrible and I'll never try it again. But I have great respect for them.
Good. Thank you for clarifying that relationship. Did you want to say anything else about that, Stephanie?
No, but I think a stage manager shouldn't be offended if they don't have that friendly relationship, because some directors, like Jim is saying, some stage directors really want to just say, this is my vision, help me put it on stage, and that's your job. So I think it's better to have the great rapport with someone, because it just makes the process more enjoyable for everyone. But I think a stage manager shouldn't be offended if the stage director doesn't want to be their best friend, because in the end, you know, it's about that picture that's in the proscenium. So, yeah.
Yeah, and they're going to abandon you shortly anyway. Generally. Okay, so you get into Tech Week. Let's talk a little bit about what happens there's during those nights of Tech Week, which can be anywhere from, usually it's just 4 to 5 nights. Let's start off with the dry tech. Can you guys talk about your responsibility and the definition of that?
So a dry tech is your stage crew, the people who are going to do your lights, your sound, and maybe you have other folks around too, but it's without any actors. You may have an actor or two if they are integral to moving something, but dry tech is just making sure that you have cues in your book to help the technical aspects of the show run. Because in some cases, those actors are not so smart about technical things and they might get in your way. So the dry tech is to make sure that all the backstage stuff starts to run seamlessly, because those folks haven't had the same amount of rehearsal time that the folks on stage have had.
Yeah. Okay, so Jim, what happens the next night in wet tech?
So wet tech is when you start to bring the actors into that space and add it to everything that you've done with dry tech. So you may have worked out that someone is going to enter from stage left and a light is going to change and it's going to fade in for 5 seconds, and once you bring the actors in, you realize that that's too slow, that's too fast, that doesn't work with the pacing that the show has had, and so you're starting to sort of meld those two things together, and that's really, that wet tech is really when you're starting to see actors with lights on them for the first time. Oftentimes they may have had some costume pieces before then, but you're starting to add some of that. The sound is hitting them oftentimes for the first time in the middle of scenes. And so you're bringing it all together. It's still clunky. It's still really clunky. But if you have a good, solid dry tack, and that's why you don't have the actors there during dry tack, is you want to be as prepared as you can to maximize your time with the actors during wet tech. But if you have a really good, solid dry tech and are organized, it makes wet tech less clunky, but it's always going to be a little clunky.
Okay, so thank you. So now you've gotten through it, and most of the time I feel like we got through it. That's what it feels like at the end of that day, that evening. So now we go into, for the rest of Tech Week and through the show, how does your night go? Are you arriving at the theater before everyone else?
Oh, I mean, stage manager is generally the first person there and the last one to leave almost any given night. They're there oftentimes meeting. You'll have somebody who is working on lights well before the actors get there. So you're there just making sure that everything is set up to go as smoothly as possible. Really, at that point, throughout the better part of the production.
And then you have production meetings that follow your rehearsals often to figure out what happened that you can fix to start the next day. So, and hopefully you have an assistant of some sort who can call people who are coming late, because more often than not, you have actors who are stuck in traffic or dealing with something at the office, and so you need somebody to help you with that.
I've never had an actor show up late to a rehearsal. That's weird.
What? You must have some sort of charisma spell you put on people.
So now you are you're moving through rehearsal, your final week of rehearsals, your Tech Week, and the director is there. You're working with everything. How are you? Let me move forward in the interest of time. And this is a whole master class that someday we need to have you guys teach at Kumu Kahua Theater. There's so much, I don't feel like I'm giving anything away from that class because there's so much to go into. But let's talk about, the show is actually running, and the director is gone. And let's say you have a situation where something is happening in a way other than the director directed it to go. What do you do? And let me give you a little more. Let's say that an actor is delivering a line in a way that was not rehearsed and changes the feel of a scene a little bit. How are you going to handle that?
No, Jim, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I think one of the things that needs to happen, and as Stephanie pointed out earlier, I mean, sometimes directors leave for good. Once a show opens, sometimes they leave, they come back, or they check back in from time to time. But one of the things that needs to be established during that time period is a communication between the director and the stage and the cast, that, Jim, Stephanie are the stage managers. We are working to get this show to this point, which includes Donna saying this line this way. If we deviate from that in the director's absence, then Jim and Stephanie have the authority to bring you back to where we agreed we were going to be. So it needs to, that authority sort of needs to be established by the director, especially if they're going to step away, and a lot of times actors don't even realize they're doing it.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point. Specifically, since you used me as an example, I would never do something like that on purpose. And throughout, we also should mention that, most of the time things go as rehearsed and as planned throughout the run of a show. But there are incredible things that happen, like an actor injures themselves and is in the emergency room instead of at the theater, or that happens to someone who is running lights or sound, and you are the people responsible in those situations also. Yeah. Care to talk about any of those situations? Have either of you had such an emergency situation that you had to work with?
I think you have as quick of a conversation as you can with the people who are involved. Say if it's a scene with choreography and someone has just broken their leg and they're not going to be able to make it on stage for their dance number, you do what you can to call people over and say, even if you have to do it as they're entering, say, Jeff just broke his ankle and he won't be on stage with you. Please fill in that, fill in his spot. Or hopefully you have worked with the folks enough that you can give them a really quick direction of how to tell them that something is going on and that you can fix it by doing these two things. Give them a really fast option.
Yeah, I remember once there was an actor who I was in it was summer stock, and so we were doing sort of conservatory. So we were doing one show one night, another show another night. And so I had an actor who was a small part, but literally forgot the show was that night. And he was just a really kind of an extra in Hair at the Wind. And so we were able to sort of fill in for him with relative ease. But I did once have to fire a sound operator during intermission of a show because she came to the performance in an altered state, and so as the stage manager, and she was seated right next to me in the booth, and I during intermission fired her and then had to run sound during the second act. So you have to know. You have to be able to step in and do those kinds of things sometimes. Fortunately, I've not had to do that with actors.
I've seen a stage manager have to get on stage and play Benvolio because Benvolio nearly cut his thumb off one night.
Yeah, it happens.
It does. Then the show really must go on. So in wrap up, I'd like to ask you guys one more question. As your protege, what would you tell me about how you define, the show is closed, it's a wrap. How do you define your success as a stage manager for that production?
Did people enjoy themselves? Not only in the audience, but on stage too? I think that is a big key to the success. And if it isn't just enjoyment, it's also, are people leaving talking about the show? So, I mean, I suppose it could have been a really horrible show, but people are interested by it. So maybe that's some artistic success too. Even though it wasn't so good, it sparked some sort of conversation.
Yeah, I find stage management to be tremendously fulfilling, and I am very proud of the shows that that we've worked on through production because, you know, certainly the actors are the ones that are on stage. They're the, you know, visually they're what everyone sees. I oftentimes think if a stage manager is really doing a great job, then nobody knows that they're there, because you don't want, if somebody's recognizing that, like, you know, oh, the stage manager was a little late on that cue, or this, you know, wasn't quite right, then you're sort of aware of that aspect of the show and you don't want them to be. But it becomes like this little, it's like your little baby, and, you know, you want to sort of take it through with everybody else. And it's a tremendously fulfilling responsibility, and I see it as a great way to sort of fulfill both an artistic and a sort of technical side of things. Every time I'm acting in a show, I'm always longing to be a stage manager, and then every time I'm a stage manager a show, I'm like, I'm going to audition for something.
Perfect. Yeah, you're right. It really does take a nice balance of left and right brain behavior to really make it work. And both of you do, I'm not just blowing sunshine here, a really nice job of that. That's why you are the two that I wanted to talk to about this. So thank you very much. That's it. That was easy, right?
Yeah, thanks for asking us.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to look forward to that masterclass someday. Perhaps someday, one of these days, maybe someday I will have the bravery to stage manage a show. It has always just intimidated the living heck out of me, I have to tell you. So I applaud you, I thank you, and thank you for being on Backstage.
All right.
Thank you.